Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. Brian Knutson with you again this week. I'm going solo. Milu's got some stuff going on, and so I'm recording an episode. Don't know when this will release, but at some point we may need it, so we will use this. But I think I've got an evergreen topic here, similar to my normal rants. So one idea that I had just earlier today, as a matter of fact, so I'm actually workshopping this with you. It's not only a rant, but this is Brian just workshopping an analogy. Is kind of the similarities between a submarine and cybersecurity. And I realize that there's a lot of parallels there, and I think it could be pretty effective for explaining why cybersecurity is important, some of the disciplines of cybersecurity, and the people that are involved with it, how they all work together to keep the things on the inside safe. So let's just kind of dig into this. There's a number of areas that a little bit of AI has helped me put together an outline that I feel really good about. So let's just kind of dive into it. Would love for you to send me any feedback you have on this one. I'm sure this is one that if I come at the end of this as, you know, this thing actually works, it actually floats. Lots of puns in this episode. Sorry about that. If this works and it floats, then it's something I'll probably start using. So I would love to hear your feedback on this, and could potentially be something that you can help me develop. So here we go. The idea of a submarine. So if you don't know what a submarine is, which I find hard to believe, but just in case you don't, it is generally referred to as a boat, usually within a Navy's arsenal of ships and boats that they would have, that is designed to work completely underwater. Interesting evolution as you look at them. I think the first submarines in the mid 1800s, potentially, they were generally like diesel powered or coal powered type devices. So they would have exhaust, or they would need to come up on a regular basis to exhaust out the bad air, let in good clean air, and then they'd have to go back under again. Modern nuclear subs generally can be underwater for months at a time, I believe. They've got air recyclers. They've got the ability to, they're not consuming the air in order to create it. They've got that nuclear reactor on board that allows them to do things. So ultimately, the idea of a submarine is to be under the water, being able to be hard to find, and really difficult to find in the water. The water is a very dynamic environment, much more so than the air, also much denser than the air. So there's a lot more difficulty in finding things that are under the water. And of course, other submarines may be in there. It's a vast, vast ocean, so it's hard for them to run into each other. You've got movies like The Hunt for Red October that is all about a submarine that kind of goes rogue and it's worries about us going to start a nuclear war and things like that. As both sides try to find that boat. Very interesting concept. I love submarines. If you ever get the chance to go and tour one, I highly recommend it, because it's kind of mind blowing what it's like to live on one of those, much less live on there for weeks or months at a time. Very, very wild thing to consider, where life can take some people sometimes. I've known people that have been stationed on submarines, and some of the stories, that don't often tell many stories, but the story as I have heard are kind of crazy. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Obviously, working in water, underwater all the time, very harsh environment. We're talking salt water. And so very corrosive environment. And of course, at depths where humans just simply cannot exist, unless they've got some, apparatus to go with it. Obviously, you've got a certain depth which you can snorkel, and you can only go down for so far. You've got scuba gear that can take you down so far. Then you start getting into where it's really cold, and that scuba gear's gotta be containing the heat. And then you get to the point where the pressure is too much. There's apparently a whole culture on skin diving and stuff like that. Let's see how deep we can go. and that has introduced some interesting problems for the human body. And then you get to the depths where you can't live outside of a metal container. Of course, lots of things that go into that. But ultimately, the concept here is that you're in a harsh environment. That environment will kill you fairly quickly, if it were to be breached or if you were to leave that container. And that's not unlike our own data center type environments or cloud type environments. Like we build very strong exteriors that are designed to withstand the pressures, withstand the corrosive elements of the open internet. Generally speaking, you're not putting computers directly on the internet. You're putting it behind some sort of firewall, some sort of device that is going to, at the very least, slow down attackers from being able to get into your environment and do damage, to do things. And that is an important part of any modern data center and has been for decades, ever since the internet, really. So, that analogy of the whole of the submarine is generally very continuous. It doesn't have very many gaps in it. There are very few gaps that are very well contained, much like our own firewalls and external protections for our environments. It's reinforced, and we make sure to patch it on a regular basis. We make sure that there are strong controls around those ports and access points that exist on that exterior. So very similar in that regard. When we look at cybersecurity, we want to compare that to what a submarine is doing. We're talking about, like I mentioned, firewalls. We're talking continuous maintenance that includes things like patching vulnerabilities and potentially replacing those on a regular basis. Um, Being able to adapt to new attacks that are coming in, being able to withstand the pressures of things like a denial of service attack, where they're going to pound your internet connection with tons of requests. How is your exterior of that environment going to handle that type of an attack? Making sure that those types of pressures can be repelled, to be pushed back, to be withstood, if you will. So the analogy continues kind of as I transition to the second topic, is the fact that hard exterior, that well-maintained exterior that, we would never consider putting a business up without it, we also have to assume is going to fail at some point. And, once that breach happens, it can be catastrophic if it's not properly controlled, properly identified. And this is where we start talking about with a submarine has a bunch of watertight compartments. Critical areas of the infrastructure are, you know, compartmentalized. They're put into a specific room that can very easily be isolated from the rest of the ship. Watertight doors is really what that kind of comes down to, and walls that can withstand the external pressures, because at some point the external pressures, if they break through the hull, can become internal pressures, can be pressures from one room to the next. And so they have to be designed and built in a way to be able to withstand that, no matter which ones. Much like that in our network infrastructures, this is where zero trust really comes into play. This is where having that ability to say, once they get into one area of the internal network, they don't have easy access to other parts of the internal network. They can't jump from one room to the next, if you will. Or we've got a really good plan for containing the damage, containing the breach into a specific area by pushing a big red button and closing doors very quickly that can then withstand that. Most common way of doing this in a network infrastructure is internal firewalls, having multiple different networks divided by firewalls. And maybe those firewalls are closed down most of the time. If you're going to like a isolated recovery environment or clean room type environment, those that firewall is as tied down, if not more so, than the external firewall. They may be more selective, but still fairly open. So you've got the ability for stuff to transit through and to be able to move back and forth, but is highly controlled. Only certain users can get across, or only certain computers can talk across this. And that's ultimately the design of a zero trust infrastructure, is to say, I know system A needs to talk to system B. System B is that SQL server versus the system A being that external web server. So I want those two to be able to talk to each other, but not for anybody that is on that web server to talk to anything else internally. That is the only thing I'm going to allow through the firewall from that host in what we would call the demilitarized zone, or the DMZ, only has access to that. And so that may be things like communication lines or electronic components that need to talk between those two compartments. We will allow those things. We will tighten that hole as much as possible. So we allow those things to get through, but nothing else to get through, and make sure that's really, really tight in how things are able to transmit from room to room, if you will. So subdivisions, really a focus on making sure that a single failure is not a system-wide failure. We don't want the whole thing to fall down. We don't want the whole boat to sink if there's some sort of hole that gets punched through there, that there are multiple layers that they would have to get through in order to get a hole into the interior. And then once a hole into the interior allows water to flow all the way in, that then now is going to be easily contained, that we're going to be able to say, okay, cool, we flooded one room, and hopefully that room is not a critical component, but it becomes a part of the failure chain that we can then contain it at that point. Talk a little bit about adaptability and the incident response here closer to the end, which does transition into that. But it becomes a piece of the puzzle that you need to think about ahead of time, because in order to shut that down in the case of a cyber incident, you can't come up with that plan. You can't put that firewall in place in the middle of an incident. Like, it needs to be there ready to go, and more importantly, very easy to shut down. You may have it very well tied down, very tight. It's a small door, so even if the flood starts to happen in one compartment, that when you go to close it down, you still have the ability to control it. It's not complete free access. They're going to have to work harder to get in the same amount of water to get that attack to go through that particular firewall, thus making it easier to close it and prevent it from spreading from that perspective. So that honestly was a big part of why I first came up with this analogy, was zero trust in these watertight compartments within a particular submarine. The next topic I want to talk about is kind of what the thing is doing. Why is it down there? What is it doing in the deep water? Why do we have these IT systems? And more importantly, why do we have these security systems? So when we talk about a submarine and what it's doing in that environment, it's looking for things. It's generally trying to be as quiet as possible and try to find the other things that are being as quiet as possible. Sometimes they will be attacking ships on the surface, and those are generally not operating in a stealth mode. They're not trying to be as quiet as possible. They're going to make a lot of noise. And when you see this in movies, it's, they're just ambient listening for the most part. Water's really good at transmitting sound. It's not great at transmitting good sound over long distances. So you generally have to get close to be able to hear it. But once you hear it really well. And so being able to look for ships and potentially attack them before they can be seen. So maintaining stealth is important. Again, the hunt for Red October was big on being able to two submarines under the water trying to find each other, trying to attack each other while maintaining their stealth and not being found by the other is oftentimes the goal there. And so that sonar concept comes into play here as well, which is an active listening device, which is essentially, I'm going to send out a sharp ping that is going to transmit well through the water, reflect off of anything else that it finds, and then come back at me. And then based on how it comes back at me, I can make determinations on the size, how far away it is, which direction it is, things like that. It's not perfect. And works very similar to the way radar does. So airplanes and stuff in the air are going about it. But being able to search for things, being able to have both ambient and active listening capabilities to look for it and you see this in movies where two submarines are trying to find each other. They generally don't want to use their sonar. They generally don't want to send out that ping. Um, and then there are more passive ways, from a vision perspective. Generally, a submarine doesn't have windows because windows are hard to deal with the pressure side of things. You're a different material. You've got to attach those two pieces together. Where that attachment point is the potential for a leak. You can't really weld glass and metal together. So you generally don't have windows on a submarine, and if you do, they're really small and they're kind of hard to see out of. If you think about a portal on a ship, like a cruise ship, not always the best experience to look out on. And plus, you're oftentimes at depths where there isn't a lot of light. So how do you deal with that? How do you get vision of things? We are visual creatures for the most part. That's where periscopes come in. So you've got that ability to take a viewing tube and put it a distance away, usually above water, so you can look for the surface ships. Again, being able to be as stealthy as possible still. So you've got this tiny little, essentially telescope, if you will, type of a device that comes up out of the water and can look around. So briefly being able to check the surface for things. These are all threat intelligence. These are all logging tools. These are all things that we can analogize into cybersecurity as log collection or SIM EDR type tools, things that we use to gather what's going on around us, within the environment, outside the environment, to understand what's going on. It's all about information, really, is kind of what it comes down to. Is the common theme between the two, is that gathering information, trying to find other things that are being stealthy in the environment. When we look at a threat actor that has breached our environment, is in our environment, their job is to stay stealthy, and our job is to find them without letting them know that we found them. In a lot of cases, sometimes there is value in knowing the threat actors in your environment without them knowing that you know. And so being able to look for them passively to find evidence of that. Of course, with an EDR tool, we're actively going to try and stop them from doing bad things. Obviously, that's going to alert them to some extent, even though those are very automated tools that, I could trigger that thing and lay quiet for a while and hope that they don't actively find me and notice me. Can happen in a submarine versus submarine type of situation as well, where they're trying to go back and forth with each other. So that concept of continuous monitoring, that concept of identifying threats before engagement happens, being able to gather information about them while they're trying to gather information about you, so that when you go to attack them, you know where to remove them from, you know exactly where to go to get them, to be able to clean out all their backdoors, to clean out their identities that they put into the environment, any other backdoors they may have put in place. Like, you want to find all that before you evacuate them, so you can evacuate every hole they've punched into your exterior at the same time. Plug them all at once, so that they can't get back in. Similar to water, like, you want to plug all those holes, otherwise water is going to keep coming in. And if you don't have the proper tools in place to find and close those leaks and to contain those leaks, that submarine's gonna sink, and your data is gonna get exfiltrated, and eventually you're gonna get ransomed or wiperware, where everything gets deleted, something like that. Or worst case, they're going to stay silent and continue to feed information to a nation state, a competitor, whatever that might be, that they can use against you. So yeah, that ability of every war is an information war comes into play for both there. The final topic I kind of alluded to before is what I kind of call the people aspect of things, which comes into multiple layers. So primarily going to talk about adaptability, teamwork, and incident response. How do we react to things? So in this part of the analogy, obviously you've got people in the submarine. They're doing their different jobs. They're all specialists. They all have their defined role, but they're going to have to be adaptable. If something were to happen and somebody were to get injured or worse, killed, someone else is going to have to step in and take over that role if it's a mission critical role. You're always going to have some depth there. You're going to have some, um, multiple people that can jump in at that point, but everybody kind of needs to be prepared to jump in on everything, have a basic understanding of how the engine works so that somebody can help work on that engine. Should the primary engineer, be incapacitated for whatever reason. Similarly, our security teams are all hands on deck. Again with the puns, um, being able to jump in and help everybody wherever they may need help. You don't want people sitting on the sidelines just like, well, that's not my job, so I'm not gonna participate till we get to my point. IT people is a very generic way. The backup team. Well, let me know when I can restore things. I'm gonna go hide until then. No, like those people can look through data. They can try to find commonalities. They can start logging into systems and shutting them down or pulling log files off of them. Or, there's lots of things. We all have these skill sets, and, not everyone's going to be great at it. They're not going to be the fastest. They may not be super well trained to do that, but, we're all smart people. I like to think IT and security people get into these roles because we do like the challenge. We do like the adaptability of it and the constant having to learn. And sure, maybe that means I need to sit side by side with somebody that knows how to do it and they can teach me, and I'm going to slow them down. But ultimately, if we're both working 80%, then that's going to be way better than one person working 100%. And plus does give that other person the ability to potentially go to the bathroom on occasion or maybe catch a nap, because you've got two people working on things. Which of course is part of the teamwork aspect as well. This has to be, I'm a fan of saying this security is everybody's problem. And so as a marketing person, I have a role to play in security for my company. I may not be on the security team. I may not even be on the IT team, but that doesn't mean I don't have a role to play to keep the company safe, to be able to report, hey, I'm seeing this phishing attempt. Others may be seeing it. And if 10 people are seeing it, now we've got a line, not just a segment. We can see that there is a pattern happening here, and we can assume others are probably getting it that aren't reporting it. And we can check on everybody and see if this thing is working. Being able to be part of that team, having that teamwork, having that everybody's trained to spot these things and understand, hey, that looks like a leak over there. Is that a leak? Hey, leak expert, take a look at this. And they know, it may be coming down through the wall. We don't know where it's coming from, but they can look at it and get an assessment of how big the hole is based on the pressure of the water that we're in right now and how fast the water is running. I may not be able to do that, but I may be able to spot the fact that there is a hole somewhere and someone can then come along and take a look at it. So that teamwork aspect of things, being very strong there. And of course, incident response, again, kind of bleeds into this next one, is that everybody needs to be prepared to know what their job is should that incident happen. What is my part of that plan? What is my part of the job of keeping this boat from sinking? Keeping our infrastructure from becoming more infected by having more stuff encrypted, having more stuff exfiltrated? What is my job to ensure that we get from, hey, we know that there's an incident, to this incident is complete and the environment has been cleaned up and the threat actor has been kicked out of the environment and we've started to figure out how we can prevent this from happening in the future? What is my role in making sure that time frame is as short as possible? That is ultimately what all of our cyber resilience planning needs to be towards, is how do we shrink that time of those 2 points? So success relies on the entire crew doing their jobs, being able to work cohesively as a team, being able to you know adapt to new tactics, adapt to new jobs, fill in the seat that needs to be filled in as quickly as possible because that person's on vacation and we are having a cyber incident and somebody needs to sit in that chair and do that thing. Who's next best suited for that? Ideally, that's part of your plan. Your plan kind of lays out for this role, this person's lead, if they're not available, this person, and so on and so forth. And having kind of that rank order of who's going to jump into the seat. So there's no question as to, hey, who wants to come sit in the seat and do this log investigation thing? That adaptability is super important. to prevent the hostile environment on the outside becoming part of the interior of it. And of course, these systems are both super complex, both a submarine and an IT environment. They're super complex, which means we all have our specialties. They would not operate without specialists doing that. So I don't want to minimize the fact that any given seat can have anybody sit in it. We obviously have to have some level of training to be effective on them. But that's where drills can come in. That's where cross training can come in. These are all things that submarines do as well as IT should as well, is making sure that, hey, maybe I don't know all of the details on how to do this thing, but here's a quick guide that is laminated and attached to the thing that I need to operate. And it gives me maybe not the details of what I need to do, but enough to remind me of the training that I had a year ago that was, pretty high level. And it was all about not necessarily maintaining the equipment, but making the equipment do what it needs to do for as long as it needs to do it. This thing may break in my operation of it because I don't know how best to operate it without damaging it, but at least it's going to work. Another analogy, to throw another analogy in this, is that when you drive a car, like driving a car a certain way will ensure that it lasts longer. Don't drive over the pothole, but at the same time, don't swerve so hard that you damage the car swerving around the pothole. But there are times when, like, my focus needs to be elsewhere, and if it damages the vehicle, so be it. I need to get going as quickly as possible and don't have time to swerve around things. So mixing the analogies, and I'm surprised I made it this long without doing that. So getting back to the submarine analogy, looking at cross-functional communication, how are we communicating with one another in the heat of an incident is critical as well. So, how do I communicate if I can't get into that particular room? Where are the communication mechanisms in the next room over? Should I have to evacuate that room because it's filling with water? What can I do in that room to help deal with the situation? How do I communicate if in the case of a submarine, the bridge where all of the executives are at, the captain of the boat? What if I can't get a hold of that person? What do I do then? Who else am I looking for? What do I do if I'm completely cut off from the rest of the boat and have to operate completely autonomously? What is the goal number one in a situation where we've been attacked and the hull has been breached? Everybody should know what their part is without having to have a central command to tell them what to do. Obviously, it's best if you have that and you want to stay in communication so that they know what's going on. But should the worst happen and communication lines get severed, what do I need to do? What is my job? What is the one thing that needs to happen that will make things safe? And if that's pushing the button and shutting down power to the data center so everything shuts down, so be it. That may be the worst case scenario for a data center engineer in the midst of a cyber attack. And of course, this isn't just about the IT teams. This isn't just about the security teams. This is the entire business. You can kind of think about it as the captain of the boat is the CEO of the company. They don't know how to operate the engine. You don't necessarily want them operating the engine, but they are still responsible for the engine as a part of the greater whole. And so making sure that all of the different pieces are going to coordinate and work together means that communication across all the different areas is critical, so that the people in charge know what's going on and the people adjacent to your operations know what's going on as well. So, like I said, kind of workshopping this. This is a lot of thinking it out loud with a really rough sketch, a really rough outline. But I think those four areas really do tie the analogy well together. So defense in depth, zero trust, being able to separate those things, and ensuring that should all of the tough exterior that we put in there, that's hopefully flexible to withstand pressures, is adaptable to changes in the environment, is hopefully going to hold. But we have to assume it's not. So we need to put measures in place to ensure that whatever happens, one, it's got to break through multiple layers, and two, once it gets into a compartment, that compartment can be closed off and not allow that breach to move on past that. Ideally as autonomously as possible, but being able to shut it down as quickly as possible if not. Having that constant vigilance, always looking for more information. Information overload is a real thing in security. I don't want to diminish that. This is where AI and systems like a SIM can come into place to help take all that data and figure out what's going on with it and raise up the patterns. No small task there whatsoever, but neither is it on a submarine. You may send out a ping and get something back, and we see this in TV shows and movies all the time. Oh, this was just a whale. It wasn't another submarine, and we hit the red alert and all these things. So there are false negatives. You need to be prepared for that false negative, and then you need to adapt to at what point between false negative and false positive do we decide to react. And of course, the training, the teamwork, the people aspects of it still matter a lot. Even if we're using agents in there, at some point we need humans in the loop to be able to make those decisions and ensure that things are going to happen, because it's going to affect us ultimately. And we can't always trust autonomous systems, especially in harsh environments where stealth is the number one game. So that's the analogy. That's cybersecurity as a submarine. Hopefully that helps you to understand it. Maybe it helps you to explain it at a picnic this summer, as you're talking to people that are not in cybersecurity. Maybe they understand how a submarine works. Heck, maybe you're talking to a military person who has worked on a submarine, and you can say, hey, you do a lot of the same job I do, and here's how they're similar. If nothing else, maybe it's an interesting talking point. But I would love to hear your feedback on it. What do you think about it? Where does the analogy fall apart? The analogy always falls apart at some point. I feel like I've gotten to a good enough depth, another bad pun, to make it work as a common talking point. But would love to hear your feedback on maybe where I could go deeper with it, or maybe where I should avoid to fear of running aground on a part of the analogy that simply doesn't work. So would love to hear your feedback. Very simple, info@socializingsecurity.com, or hit me up on LinkedIn. You're free to send me DMs. I usually respond to real feedback that people send me. So would love to hear that. But otherwise, I really appreciate you listening in with me as I rant once again. And just generally, thank you for socializing with us. And we look forward to talking to you on the next episode. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.